Hey everybody, oops, let me adjust my camera here. It's Matt. We have a question and answer, but the big question that I'm getting right now, and I always get from everyone, is where is piano lesson number 3? And don't worry, piano lesson number 3 is coming. It is coming out tomorrow, so keep your eyes open, and I know you're going to like it because we're going to go ahead and finish up the Ode to Joy and all sorts of other cool stuff. And I have several questions that I've gotten from people, and I want to make sure I answer them to help you with your practice. A few of you have asked about the paid courses that I mentioned before. Again, these lessons are all free, but they are part of a larger set of piano courses, and those run about $25 per lesson. And so if you're interested in those, I've put a link below. But again, this is 100% free, as just some of you have asked about that. So if you want to check out those piano lessons, you can check them out in the link. One question I got is, what is that painting that I saw? Someone must have seen the corner of this. Let me see if I can show you this. This is, it's actually bigger than it looks right now on the camera, but that is Esther. Esther is a painting, I think I mentioned I love to travel. Esther is a painting that I saw in Sydney, Australia, and fell in love with, and I contacted the artist, and it was really cool. It's really awesome. So she kind of watches over me, kind of has a critical glare, so it makes sure that I'm practicing correctly. So speaking of practicing correctly, some of the other questions here. Do I have to count out loud when I practice? It is helpful to be able to count out loud when you practice, and I've found that many adult students, for whatever reason, kind of resist it a little bit because it's just not that fun. But if you can do it at least half the time, it might slow you down at first because it's a lot to think about, but as a skill set, it's really important. So I would go ahead and at least half the time, just make sure you're able to kind of count out loud with a steady beat or a somewhat steady beat, so that down the road, if you do continue with these lessons, you'll have that kind of skill set. A similar question I got, should I put the metronome on? If you don't know what a metronome is, it's that thing that kind of clicks. You know, the old versions went like this, back and forth, and click, click, click when you practice. The newer versions are the electrical versions that you can kind of notch up. Metronomes are really helpful. I think there's sort of this myth that they're required, especially at the beginning stages. If you're trying to work on putting your hands together, or you're trying to work on having some finger independence and getting your coordination, they can actually be a little bit of a hindrance, because what they do is if they're kind of clicking and clicking, they're going to give you the sense that you have to kind of keep going, and that's going to generate tension. So like if you're practicing your Ode to Joy, oops, this piano is a little soft. I don't like to disturb my neighbors. If you're practicing this Ode to Joy, and then maybe this is a little bit of a hard couple notes for you, I'd rather you actually slowed down and thought about staying nice and relaxed when you played them, instead of just like having something clicking. That can do more harm than good. After you get it in your fingers, for sure, learning how to put the metronome on and kind of stay with it and keep a steady beat is super, super important. And I recommend a lot of metronome practice for my students. But at first, when you're first learning, you can put it on maybe once just to see how close you are to the beat, but I wouldn't keep it on all the time. Counting out loud is actually better. How much should I practice a day? I would say it's not how much you practice a day as much as that you're practicing, trying to practice at the same time every day. What you want to do at these beginning stages is build that habit of sitting down at the piano whenever it's your piano practice time, even if it's only for a couple minutes, because that habit's what's going to pay off over the long term, way more than kind of saying, oh, I'm going to practice 3 hours or 10 hours a day or something crazy. You're going to burn out if you do that. But if your habit is every morning when I wake up, I'm having my coffee, I sit down at the piano even if it's only for 2 minutes, and then I can go do all the other stuff I'm worried about. That's an awesome habit. Or the second I get home from work, I sit down at the piano and practice even if it's only for a minute or two. That's a great habit. Some days you're going to practice a minute or two, some days you're going to practice half an hour, but that's, I think, more important. I would say on a good practice day at this stage, if you can get in 20 or 30 minutes, that's awesome, but don't beat yourself up if you can't. It's more about making that habit of sitting down at the piano. Couple more questions. I'm having trouble getting my fingers to work independently. That's a pretty big topic, but I would say the main thing here is, watch my videos about making sure your hands are in alignment and that make sure that your wrist is not too low or too high. You want it in this nice neutral position. And then usually when people say that, it means one of a couple things. If you're having trouble kind of getting your fingers to work apart from each other, it could mean you're trying to go too fast. That's super, super common. If you're trying to speed through things, the fingers are going to clench up, and that's going to be a problem. And then the other thing I see all the time in terms of fingers kind of clenching up or people feeling like they don't have independence is that there's tension in the forearms. So make sure as you're practicing, if you're doing some pattern like this, you can just kind of pause on every note and make sure that you're not locked in here. A really good exercise is to just see if you can gently float up and down like this. And I talk about this a lot in one of the bonus modules of my piano lessons that I have the link, the paid version. So if you are interested in those, you'll get lots of stuff in the bonus modules of the full course on piano technique. But I also talk about a lot in these free lessons. So make sure that you're not going too fast, that you're pausing if you're not sure what's coming up, because if you're not sure what's coming up, that's going to generate tension, right? And also just make sure that on each note, you don't have this tension in your forearms, and over time, you're going to get that finger independence. It can take time. Our hands are meant to work to grab things, not to do this. So don't get down on yourself if it's a little tricky at first, but I promise you'll be amazed at what you can develop if you just practice slowly and stay relaxed. Okay, I have one more question. Is it okay to look at my hands when I play, or where should I look? And what about learning to read music? So there's kind of this old myth that we shouldn't look at our hands when we play the piano, and it's just that, it's a myth. It's totally fine to look at your hands when you play the piano, and a lot of great pianists do that. A lot of great pianists, if they have a piece memorized, also will close their eyes, and that's a good experiment. As you practice, kind of close your eyes and see if you can get that kinesthetic sense of what's on the keyboard. How does it affect learning to read music? In the free lessons, we don't get into learning to read music, but in the future lessons, we do, and I think starting in lesson 4, and it doesn't affect it at all, except that you do want to practice being able to look away and have a sense of where your hands are, but there's kind of an old myth that you have to kind of be glued up here to the music and you can't look down at your hands. The more you practice reading music, though, as you progress at the piano, the less you'll kind of have to look down and up, and the more you'll get a sense of where your hands are. But don't feel bad if you're looking at your hands. It's totally cool. In fact, it's probably a good thing at this stage. So those are all the questions I have right now, but please let me know if you have any more. You can leave a comment on this page or shoot me an email, and I really hope you're enjoying the lessons, and I will see you tomorrow in the next piano lesson. Thanks a bunch, and happy practicing.